Some mysteries are loud. They happen with gunshots, screaming sirens, and headlines splashed across the morning papers. But the most haunting mysteries are quiet. They are the ones that happen in the silence, in the places where civilization ends and the void begins. They are mysteries composed of empty chairs, uneaten meals, and doors left unlocked. My name is Elias Thorne. I am a historian of maritime disasters. I deal in shipwrecks, rogue waves, and the unforgiving nature of the sea. But for 20 years, one story has sat on the periphery of my career, a shadow I couldn't quite bring myself to look directly at. It is the story of the Jacob's Tooth Lighthouse. Jacob's Tooth is barely an island. It's a shard of black volcanic rock jutting out of the North Atlantic, 18 miles off the coast of Maine. It is arguably the most inhospitable posting in the American lighthouse service. In December of 1928, 3 keepers were stationed there for a standard 3-month rotation. Their names were Thomas Albright, the head keeper, a hardened veteran of the sea; Silas Croft, the second assistant, a quiet, hulking man known for his brute strength; and William Vance, a young man, barely 20, on his first major assignment. On December 15th, a supply ship, the Hesperus, arrived to bring Christmas provisions and mail. The captain of the Hesperus noted that the lighthouse flag was not flying. More disturbingly, the customary answering Cygnus flares, usually fired to welcome a relief boat, were absent. When the crew of the Hesperus finally managed to land a small boat in the churning surf, they found the heavy bronze entrance doors of the lighthouse closed but unlocked. Inside, the lighthouse was immaculate. In the kitchen, the table was set for 3. There was cold beef on plates, bread that had gone stale, and 3 mugs of tea that had evaporated into brown stains. It looked as if they had sat down to eat and simply stopped. But the men were gone. All 3 oilskin coats and sea boots were missing from their pegs, suggesting they had gone outside willingly. The official inquiry concluded in 1929 that a massive freak wave must have swept all 3 men off the exterior gallery while they were securing equipment during a storm. It was a neat, tidy explanation. It closed the file. But it was wrong. I know it was wrong because 3 days ago, while cataloging the estate of a deceased maritime lawyer in Portland, I found something that shouldn't exist. I found the real logbook of Jacob's Tooth. The official logbook, the one presented at the inquiry, was bland. It recorded weather patterns, oil consumption, and routine maintenance. It ended abruptly on December 12th. The book I found was different. It was smaller, a personal journal kept by Thomas Albright, the head keeper. It was hidden behind a loose stone in the lighthouse foundation, recovered years later during an automation refit, and quietly pocketed by the lawyer whose estate I was now organizing. To understand what I read, I knew I couldn't just sit in my office. I had to go there. I hired a lobster fisherman willing to make the dangerous run out to Jacob's Tooth. The journey gives you time to think about isolation. 18 miles doesn't sound like far until you are on the open water. The land disappears faster than you expect. The water changes color, shifting from a coastal green to a deep, indifferent black. The swells grew larger, lifting the fishing boat and dropping it with sickening regularity. As the lighthouse came into view, my stomach tightened. It is an imposing structure, 110 feet of granite blocks dovetailed together to withstand the fury of God and nature. It doesn't look like a home. It looks like a fortress built to keep something out, or perhaps to keep something in. The fisherman, a man named Russo who didn't speak much, gestured toward the landing slip. "Tide's turning." He yelled over the roar of the engine. "You got 2 hours before it gets too rough to get you back off. Don't linger, Mr. Thorne. That rock doesn't like visitors." Getting onto the rock required timing a leap from the heaving boat onto a slippery concrete jetty decorated with barnacles. I made the jump, the cold spray soaking my jeans. I watched Rousseau turn the boat around and pull away to a safe distance. The silence hit me instantly. It wasn't a true silence. The wind howled around the tower's curvature, and the sea crashed endlessly below it. It was a silence of humanity. I was utterly alone. I pushed open the heavy bronze door. It groaned, a sound that seemed to have been trapped in the throat of the tower for decades. The air inside was cold, stagnant, and smelled faintly of kerosene and ancient dampness. I climbed the spiral staircase, 134 steps. The iron grating rang under my boots. I passed the storage rooms, the oil room, and finally reached the living quarters. It was empty now, stripped bare during the automation in the 80s. But standing there, in the circular room where the 3 men had lived, ate, and slowly lost their minds, I felt a suffocating pressure. I took Albright's hidden journal out of my satchel. I sat on the cold floor, beneath the window that looked out onto nothing but endless gray ocean, and I began to read the entries that the world was never meant to see. The early entries were normal. Albright complained about Vance's inexperience and Silas Croft's sullen silence. But around December 5th, the tone changed. December 5th. The wind has not stopped for 3 days. It is not a normal wind. It does not buffet or blow. It screams. Young Vance is struggling. He claims he hears voices in the wind, calling his name. I have told him to pull himself together. We are surrounded by water. There is no one to call. December 7th. Silas Croft has stopped speaking entirely. He spends his off hours staring at the supply winch gear. He oils it, cleans it, then oils it again over and over. His eyes are vacant. The isolation is taking him faster than I thought it would. The storm outside is relentless. The waves are striking the tower halfway up. The whole structure vibrates. As I read, I could hear the wind outside picking up, mimicking the description in the journal. The atmosphere in the tower felt heavy, charged with residual emotion. December 9th. I fear for our safety, not from the sea, but from within. Last night, I found Vance in the lantern room. He had disabled the rotation mechanism. The light was stationary, a fixed beam slicing through the fog. He was just staring into the beam, mesmerized. When I grabbed him, he screamed that they needed a steady light to find the path. Who are they, William? He wouldn't say. We had to physically restrain him to get him downstairs. The writing grew more erratic over the next few days. Albright's handwriting, usually neat and precise, became jagged. December 11th. We are not alone. I know how that sounds. I am a rational man. But things are moving. Tools are not where we left them. The coal scuttle was overturned in the night. Silas blames Vance. Vance blames the sea people. The tension is unbearable. Silas is looking at the boy with a murderous glare. I have taken the liberty of locking the rifles in the upper storage locker and keeping the key around my neck. This was the key. The official report said they died together, victims of nature. This journal painted a picture of a pressure cooker, three men trapped in a stone tube, driven mad by the relentless sound of the storm and their own brewing paranoia. Then came the final entry, December 14th, the day before the relief boat arrived. December 14th. God help us. The storm broke for an hour this afternoon. The silence was worse than the wind. We sat for dinner. Beef and bread. The tension was so thick you could choke on it. Vance started crying, just weeping silently into his tea. Silas, Silas just snapped. He stood up, his chair crashing backward. He grabbed the bread knife. He wasn't looking at Vance. He was looking at me. You brought them here, Thomas, he said. His voice didn't sound like his own. You and your damn light. You signaled them. He lunged. The entry ends there. A splatter of dark ink, or perhaps blood stained the bottom of the page. I closed the journal. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The official story was a lie, designed to protect the dignity of the service and the families of the lost men. They hadn't been swept away by a wave. They had turned on each other. I stood up and walked to the center of the room. I tried to visualize it. The table here, Silas Croft, the giant, snapping after weeks of manic repetitive behavior, young Vance, already broken by the voices he heard in the wind, cowering, and Thomas Albright, the seasoned veteran, realizing his command had utterly failed. What happened after the journal ended? I believe Silas attacked Albright. Albright, tough as he was older, but where did they go? I left the living quarters and walked down one level to the gallery deck exit. This was where the official inquiry assumed they went out. If a fight occurred here, on this slippery iron grating, 90 feet above the churning sea, it would only take one slip, one shove. But all three. I went back inside and descended further, down to the very bottom level, near the entrance. There was a small hatch here, leading to a sub-basement used for water storage. It's a dark, cramped space, carved right into the bedrock of Jacob's Tooth. I lifted the heavy iron cover. The smell was intense, concentrated brine and rot. I shone my flashlight down. It was empty, save for a few inches of stagnant water. But then my light caught something scratched into the stone wall near the ladder. It was faint, covered in decades of algae, but unmistakably man-made. It was a series of deep gouges in the rock. Not words, just frantic, desperate scratches, like an animal trying to burrow out, or a man locked in the dark, trying to claw his way to freedom. Here is what I believe happened on December 14th, 1928, based on the journal and the cold reality of the rock. Silas Croft snapped at dinner. He attacked Albright. In the ensuing chaos, perhaps Albright managed to defend himself. Perhaps he even subdued the larger man. But what of Vance, the boy who heard voices? I believe Vance, in his terror-induced psychosis, saw his superiors fighting the two pillars of his reality crumbling. In a panic, he might have fled the tower, running out onto the gallery, into the storm, choosing the mercy of the waves over the violence inside. That accounts for one. But what of Vance, the boy who heard voices? The remaining two, Albright and Croft. If Albright subdued Croft, what do you do with a violent 60-pound, heavier man in a lighthouse? You lock him up. You lock him in the only secure place available, the sub-basements. I believe Albright dragged or forced Silas Croft into that hole and locked the hatch. The scratches on the wall tell the rest of Silas's story. And then there was only Thomas Albright, alone in the tower. The dinner sat uneaten on the table, his 2 crewmen gone, one to the sea, one to the dark beneath the rock. What does a man think about in that situation? The guilt, the horror, knowing the relief boat arrives tomorrow, and he will have to explain why he is the only one left, knowing they might find the man in the basement. Albright was a man of duty, a man of the service. He couldn't face that shame. I believe Thomas Albright, having secured the tower, put on his oil, walked out the front door, and stepped off the edge of Jacob's Tooth into the freezing Atlantic. He took the keys with him. The Hesperus arrived the next day. They found a locked tower, a set table, and a mystery that would last a century. The inquiry called it a rogue wave because the truth that isolation can strip away our humanity until we are just frightened animals in a cage was too terrifying to admit. I left the journal on the floor of the living quarters, where I found the energy of the place most intense. It belonged to the lighthouse. As Rousseau's boat pulled away, fighting the turning tide, I looked back at Jacob's Tooth one last time. It stood stoic and grim against the horizon, a monument not to light, but to the profound darkness that can exist in the human heart when it is left alone too long in the silence.